spoiler in time. I'm not going to lie to you folks. On this show, Brian Brushwood and I will, in fact, spoil The Shield, episode 8 of season 7, Rick and Morty, the 10th and final episode of season 2, and the movie The Martian. But Brian, I'm Tom Merritt, and that's not a spoiler.
Yeah, I'm Brian Brushwood, and 1 week ago we did our movie draft in Spoilerin time. Hopefully a bunch of you guys participated over at draft.nightattack.tv. Is that what it is? If you want to follow along with us, let me double check that.
I think it's
draft.diamondclub.tv.
Diamondclub.tv.
/form.
/form if you want to participate, but it's already too late. I believe it's already closed.
Oh.
The Martian opened up.
Yeah.
Because you get abandoned on Mars.
Yeah. So hey, shall we check in with the movie draft?
Yes, we should. I demand that we will. Malango's winning.
Yeah.
Pack it up, Brian. Malango's got $54.3 million from the opening of The Martian. We're done.
Yeah. By the way, if you follow Malango, he's at Rambling Mango on Twitter. He released his, I believe I retweeted it, but he released his evaluation of all of the players in the movie draft, and he gave himself low marks, which I think is a little bit
Sandbagging. He's sandbagging.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's
in fact, he picked Team DTNS, myself, to win the movie draft, which I feel is an attempt to curse me.
It worked before. Yeah, and but however, having said that, I think he made a fantastic pick. He got The Martian for $29 game dollars, and it had the second highest October opening of all time, barely coming in behind Gravity. I think he's on really good track.
Yeah, and in fact, this is what everyone thought could happen. Not saying it was predicted by everyone, but a lot of people said, hey, this could be the next Gravity. Turns out pretty much is the next Gravity. So the thing is, Casey McKinnon had Gravity in our winter movie draft, and that was not enough for her to win. So it all depends on what else he's got, and he's got Paranormal Activity, The Good Dinosaur, The Big Short, and The Fifth Way. The Good Dinosaur is the one that's going to bring in the most money, I think, out of that. Next week, we see Ibbott get Pan, which I had in the last movie draft, and it just got moved on me, so I'm kind of angry at it. But it'll do okay. He only spent $9 on it, too. Steve Jobs is the one to watch. Justin Robert Young has that one.
Yeah, it's amazing because Steve Jobs, Justin paid almost as much as Malango paid for The Martian, and yet I don't think Steve Jobs is going to do anywhere near The Martian numbers, right?
I mean, that makes it sound like it's going to do bad, and that's not what Brian's saying. It's not going to do near 54 million, which means it could do 30 million, right? That's not near 50 million. So I think it'll do well, maybe not even 30 million. But yeah, it's not the kind of thing that is going to do as close to 54 million as 25 is to 29, right?
Yeah. Speaking of the movie draft, we did get an email from Joe Gass. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He says, I took a look at the movie draft and ran some numbers with the sample size of 635 Chat Realm drafters. He says, here are two of the lists of the movies sorted. Both sheets have the same data, just one has them highlighted. He says, one is the list of the likelihood that a movie would get taken by someone from Chat Realm, and the other is a percentage of the budget used by Chat Realm for the movie. Some interesting observations, he says. Check out where Star Wars falls on both lists, since it is the most expensive movie on the list, as well as Gem and the Holograms as the cheapest movie. Another interesting movie is The Big Short. It seems it was a target on the live draft, but since seems viewed as overpriced by the Chat Realm. I think the other one with the highlights is a little bit easier to read if we can. Yeah. Of course, I can't see it from where I am. But he breaks down, there we go. The most popular, like the most likely to be picked as a movie was The Martian out of 635 Chat Realm players. So everyone recognized that was a good buy. Goosebumps is number 2 because it was only $5, and certainly it's going to make close to $100,000 at least. Gem and the Holograms was the cheapest buy. The Hateful Eight, only 14% of people went for at $30, and then and then the other one is sorted by percent. What's that?
Percentage of total budget.
Oh, got it. So people blew a big chunk of their budget on the likes of The Martian and all that stuff. Really fascinating stuff. We should figure out a way to post this somewhere for everyone to see it, assuming Joe is cool with that.
Maybe we can ask him to put it online somewhere.
Yeah. All right, we'll respond
Time
to
to
that.
do a little triage,
Yeah.
which is an occasional segment on Spoiler in Time where we answer some emails about previous Spoiler in Time discussions. Sarah wrote in and said, wow, another win for introducing me to Utopia, but why so much on-screen bloody violence? It's exhausting. If they'd taken out half the gun violence, there'd still be too much. Have you watched all of it yet? Sarah says, I would say that the cliffhanger that you already knew is coming is a shame, but it's the kind of ending that doesn't suffer too much by leaving the follow-up to the imagination. David Fincher was going to do a remake of the series for HBO. Dang it, I guess they could pick up another director. There was also some interesting fantasy casting in an article on The Guardian.
Yeah, man. And as I mentioned before, I tried to get Bonnie into Utopia, and she said, yes, it's gorgeous. Yes, it's brilliantly written. Yes, it's well acted. Also, they're killing kids. And I am a mom, and I'm not going to watch this.
Well, and what's funny, it's interesting that Sarah and Bonnie both say that, because what I thought was well done with Utopia was that when you know a person is going to be killed, they often don't show them being killed.
Yes.
And I thought that was a concession to broadcast television. Like, they show the gun, then they cut away to something else, and you hear a bang, and you know what happened. But that's still too violent.
Well, and it's funny because half the time Bonnie already had her eyes covered by that point anyway. It's similar
Right.
to Fight Club originally showed the point where he messes up Angel Face. That was originally all shown, but then they were like, no, it's too violent, take it out. So they just show him punching, and because all you hear is the sound of ground hamburger being squished, it made it much, much more visceral and much, much worse for folks. So that was a case of unintended consequences.
We got an email that said, hey guys, noticed that you started watching Narcos. As a Colombian, I have to say the actors don't sound like native speakers and have horrible accents. The show has taken a lot of liberties with the characters. There's a Colombian show called El Patrón del Mal, the Boss of Evil, that is on Netflix and is better and more interesting as a representation of Pablo Escobar. If you're going to continue to watch Narcos, I would like to challenge you to watch the first episode of the Colombian series. It is in Spanish, but the subtitles are well translated. And frankly, a lot of Narcos is in Spanish anyway as well.
Yeah, man. And that came from Martin, by the way. Thank you very much for sending that in, Martin.
The Martin sent us that. The Martian is the first piece of film and or video up on our Spoiler in Time docket. I went to see it on Friday night with a bunch of SpaceX people in the audience, Brian.
Oh, wow. Were they all wearing their SpaceX outfits? How did you know?
And I assume some of them were employees, because I was like, wow, that's a lot of Occupy Mars and SpaceX shirts. This must be a bunch of people who came over from SpaceX to watch it. It was really interesting. I just want to talk crowd reaction first. Some lines got no love. For instance, I'm going to science the shit out of that. Crickets.
Yeah.
And I was kind of disappointed. I was like, wow, like nobody's into that. But there were other lines that got big reactions. And I felt like, in fact, this audience was probably too sophisticated. They're like, yeah, we know science the shit out of this. We've seen the trailer. We've read the book. But it was other lines that Matt Damon delivered, and just the delivery was enough to coax out that laugh from people.
Yeah, although that line fell flat for me in the trailer. Oh, hang on, that's the spoiler alarm going off. That line fell flat for me in the trailer as well, though. So the fact that it fell flat in the theater, and it did for me at a general audience as well. It was really interesting. First of all, spoiler alert, I did like it. I liked it a lot. I'm glad to see it. To my astonishment, and you're talking to a guy who read the book 3 times, and I don't know if it's because I read the book 3 times. I think that I got swept away, and it's not exactly fair to compare it to Gravity, but it does occupy a very similar niche. I was swept away by Gravity in a way that I was not with The Martian. The Martian, I never felt like I left the movie theater. I felt like there were parts I liked. I think there are parts that were extremely well acted. I think there are parts where I believed I was feeling, the terror, the frustration, the agony of Matt Damon. And then there was other times I was like, it's difficult, and we talked about this on the Weird Things podcast. Matt Damon is Jason Bourne, and I don't know that Mark Watney would ever be mistaken for Jason Bourne. And to have somebody who's big and muscly and superhero-y playing the role of Mark Watney, I think maybe did the character a slight disservice, because it made him powerful in a way that didn't make him as relatable as the guy in the book was to me.
I didn't get any of that. Personally, one thing that supports that interpretation, though, is we interviewed Andy Weir on Sword and Laser right after the book came out, and he himself had been surprised at the sort of rough and tough accent of the audiobook narrator when they read Mark Watney, because he had not considered Mark Watney to be any kind of military, like, rough and tough figure. And so he was kind of surprised at that interpretation of Watney. But he said, even so, like, the writing comes through and the voice was right and it still felt like Watney, but it was different than I expected. And so I feel like what you're saying is just an extension of what Andy Weir himself was saying about the interpretation of Watney in the audiobook, which is like, now we're seeing a big muscular guy. That didn't bother me at all. I thought Damon was great.
Well, and again,
Watney.
it didn't.
And I thought the way he delivered the lines felt like the way I would imagine Watney saying it sometimes. But I think he not missed a few lines, but a few lines weren't
land
exactly right.
Yeah, there were definitely some lines that didn't land. It was fascinating. I thought the Earth stuff was better than the Mars stuff, which is a bit of a pivot. Now, there were moments where you kind of saw the gears turning in his head and you got these awesome results and you felt like you were there, and it was certainly shocking the time that there's explosive decompression and you feel just how bad this planet wants to kill him. But it was inconsistent in that regard. However, so one thing you expect from, and again, we're going to talk about the fact, spoiler alert, there was a book. There were differences. There was stuff that was cut out from the book, and I think they did a good job of cutting out that stuff. And
they couldn't
Correct.
not cut things out of the book.
The
right?
biggest surprise for me was I absolutely loved what they put into the movie that was very much not in the book. The final end scene was specifically not in the book. Like, they're all like, no, we're not going to do that. That's dumb. And then they even say that in the movie, and they were like, yeah, no, go ahead. Screw you. I'm going to Iron Man it because it's going to be an awesome visual at the end of the movie. I also thought that it was a smart move to have, in the book, it was I forget, I think it was Beck that went and grabbed Watney, but they had Johansson come in. And I think the smart thing about that was, if you watched it the way the book was written, you would see Beck down there retrieving Watney, and you would know too early that Watney definitely survived and that Beck was definitely survived. But by taking this commander who is riddled with guilt over having left Watney behind, you think Watney's going to survive, but Johansson or Commander Lewis, you're thinking like, maybe she sacrifices him. It's like I could almost see that. So I think that added some valuable tension.
Sacrifices him or sacrifices herself?
Sacrifices herself for him. Yeah.
Right. That is an interesting aspect that they put in it. It felt to me like when Captain Picard goes on the away mission, even though there's no freaking way Captain Picard can go on the away mission.
Right.
And as a viewer, you're like, I kind of want to see Picard down there on the planet. I want to see Kirk down there. I wanted to see Johansson out there. I was fine with that too. I do think, though, it's the kind of thing that only works in the movie. If that had been in the book, I would have been disappointed because Weir did such a good job of staying like as close to reality as possible. And so it wouldn't have made sense. Like, in reality, no. She would never have gone out there. She's the captain of the freaking mission.
Right.
So I'm okay with that both ways. I didn't like the ending scene that much.
Oh, they were watching the Ares 5 or the next the next mission?
I didn't mind so
4?
much that we saw people watching the next mission going off, but that whole scene in the classroom with Watney, I was like, I kind of like the way the book ended better.
I liked it insofar as it gives us a hint of things to come with this franchise and this character, because it sounds like we're going to see Mark Watney again in the next book, and I felt like we got a little taste of that from the movie that we didn't get from the book.
Now, backing up, I absolutely adored the Mars scenes. I thought the Earth scenes were great, and I liked the way they interleaved scenes chronologically, which was a challenge for them because it's not the way it was written, and a lot of the tension in the story is predicated on you not knowing anything that's happening on Earth for the first part, and I think they did a good job with that. It does naturally take some of the tension out of certain elements, but I thought focusing on the Hab moments for the most of the movie was a good choice. I did miss some of the tension in the ride to the crater, but it would have been too much. It would have been too long to include that in the movie. So again, I think the pacing choices were pretty good, and I thought the cinematography was fantastic as well.
Awesome. Dude, it was beautiful and it was fun. You didn't watch it in 3D, did you? You watched it?
I did.
Oh, you did?
And the one thing I'll say about 3D is it was not necessary. I forgot I was watching it in 3D, and the only thing 3D did for me was early in the movie, I noticed that certain rocks off in the distance were moving, and they shouldn't have been, and it was some weird parallax effect.
Yeah, interesting.
Are we done? We gonna?
I don't know that there's too much more to say about it. I mean, if
I
you
feel like
haven't seen
in
it, go
different
watch
ways, we're both on the same page here, which is like, yeah, it was good.
And you should see it. It was
Yes.
good, and you should see it. No, it's not the most groundbreaking movie, but son of a bitch, it was a fun ride. It's a
Tell you
fun
what, if you
ride.
haven't read the book, go see the movie.
Yes, and then read the book. Yep, correct.
I am usually the opposite of Brian on this one, but in this particular case, I think it is absolutely the right order.
So that's where I'm coming from. Is I didn't read the book, but I went and saw the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't, having seen the movie, I don't know that I am like sold on the book. Honestly, like I
Well,
think it would
you
be
haven't read
nice.
the book.
It would be nice to experience, I guess, that story with more room to breathe.
I mean, all I know is the book is one of the best books I've read in the last 2 years. That was definitely not one of the best movies I've seen in the last 2 years. It was a
Okay.
good movie though. But yeah.
It's the same argument
Let's
I was
go.
kind of getting with the trailers. The I don't know.
We should
I'll leave it
follow
there.
up with Bryce though. Did you feel spoiled after having seen the trailers? Still, now that you've seen the movie.
No, I will say that was one thing that did come around, is that where I felt like the trailer just kind of spoiled the whole thing. There definitely was more meat behind that. I think I just didn't have the right expectation of what I thought the movie would be going in still.
Yeah, that's what we were trying to say. Is like, ooh, yeah, those aren't the main things in the movie. But let's move on to Rick and Morty, the season finale, the gut punch of a show that Brian, really funny, great lines, excellent premise, and then just punching you in the face.
Well, here's the thing: is from what I understand, they went into season 2. You know, they didn't know anybody cared about any of the characters or situations. So you'll notice virtually nothing from season 1 shows up in season 2. You know, they don't bring back Mr. Meeseeks again. You know, they instead they develop all these new worlds and all these other places. And they've even said in interviews like, well, we didn't bring him back because we didn't know you guys cared. We figured we just had to create all new stuff or whatever. And it's almost as though going into this last bit, they wrote it where it's like, well, we'll find out if they care or not right now, because you're watching the show and then they brutally murder Mr. Bird Person, and all of a sudden, and you know that he's like dead, right? And they go out of their way to take away that Doctor Who rubberiness of the universe, where it's like in previous episodes, we've seen them go anywhere, anytime, and they're not worried about anything. Instead, you know, they create this very bleak outcome where there's only 3 Earths and the one they end up on sucks, and then all of Earth gets annexed by the Galactic Federation or whatever they are, and then
The galactic government, where'd that come from? You know, like again, acknowledging like you've never mentioned this before, so what?
But it's like I felt it, and it's like I didn't know I cared about these characters until we got to this moment, and then after the credits, to have Mr. Poopy Butthole show up and just give the double-barrel middle fingers to all you guys, saying, see you in a couple years. I don't know, year and a half, maybe. Takes a while to make these. You never know.
And the sort of mocking the way you're feeling. Like, ooh, what's going to happen? I don't know. Like, shut up. That's exactly what I'm thinking. Why are you reading my mind, Mr. Poopy Butthole? You asshole. And here's the thing. They've done a very serious cliffhanger ending, right?
Yeah.
This is not a very serious, linearly made show. So that leaves me 2 options in my mind. There's obviously more ways you can go. To me, the most likely scenario is we actually see them, you know, at least in episode 1, continue a very serious story. The other is that they're like, hey, guess what? All a dream or something. Or maybe it was just Mr. Poopy Butthole watching a TV show that happens to be based on Rick and Morty, but isn't really Rick and Morty. Like, I think that's the more likely outcome, is episode 1 of season 3 just shows that none of that was real.
No, I think there's no chance of that. And the reason is because by now they've established that they are exquisitely tight script writers and they know how to tell stories. Now, granted,
That doesn't mean that none of what you just said contradicts
you're right. Look,
my supposition.
Okay, literally nothing I say can contradict your supposition. So let me propose my alternate theory, and we can decide which we think is more likely. We have seen them write these incredible tight scripts with action scenes that as if to show that they can write as good as the thing they're mocking, right? But it's always been in this context of, look, we're doing The Purge, we're doing this, we're doing that. This time, this last episode, they did it kind of unironically. They were their own thing, and they buried themselves in it. I definitely believe that they can do it again at the beginning of next season with an awesome heist episode where I believe Jerry, Beth, and and Squanchy and Morty. I mean, it's like I can totally see that happening, and I think it would be a massive missed opportunity if they did. Quick side note: did you catch the foreshadowing with Gaius Baltar and Number 6 showing up at the wedding?
Oh no, I didn't.
Played by the actors who played Gaius Baltar and Number 6.
I didn't realize that was who voiced them.
They were, well, the moment they showed up, I was like, are they intentionally doing? And I was like, why would he have a British accent? Because they were the parents of
right, of Tammy.
Of Tammy, right? And then they turned out to be robots. I think that they will go all in and just make it this epic escape thing, and then the moment the escape's over, they'll do some rubbery stuff to go back to like, hey, it's back to business as usual. Blah, 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 blah.
I think that's perfectly possible, but I also think it's possible that they rub your nose in the fact that that's not what they were really doing the whole time. And maybe it's both, right? Maybe they start off with a sincere heist episode like you're talking about that's really tight and really well done, and then we go back to Mr. Poopy Butthole and he's watching it with Rick and Morty, and it was never like, it was all on the TV like reality show thing, and it just in an infinite number of universes somebody's going to make a story that happens to mimic our lives, Morty. Like I that's what they do. They create amazing things and suck you in, and then they slap you in the face and go, ha ha, we knew what you were thinking, which is exactly what they did with Mr. Poopy Butthole at the end of this. So I would almost be disappointed if they don't twist it some way. And in fact, probably in a way that I can't even anticipate.
Well, Waffleophagus also points out that they would be breaking with tradition because season 1's ending did directly play into season 2's opening. So to break with that and be all like it was just a dream, I think would be inconsistent with what they have been doing.
Don't get too hung up on it's just a dream. Season 2 just ended with Mr. Poopy Butthole watching a TV show.
Yeah. Yes. Well, also, Mr. Poopy Butthole is a figment of the imagination. He's a virus that.
No.
I mean, according, it's a matter of interpretation.
And actually, I would say that there were a lot of opportunities for the show to say it was all a dream and not happen, and to write off entire plots. And they didn't take that once.
Exactly. I feel like, and again, I'm not hung up on tying it specifically to the dream thing, but it's like, let me put it this way. I think that would be a much more difficult stone needle to thread to make it be a dream and make people happy with that ending. It seems like it would be easier to just write a really kick-ass opening episode that exactly hits on all cylinders.
Morty taking off his Blips and Chips helmet.
I don't. Would you feel good after that? Would that be?
Depends on how they do it. I feel like these guys could do it. I mean, they just did it to me, right?
I think that would be harder.
Fun at me at the end of this episode. I think they could. Again, saying it's all a dream probably isn't fair, because if they do say it was all a dream, I will be very disappointed.
Right.
But some kind of thing where it's like, well, it didn't happen the way you thought it happened, I think is coming.
Okay.
Could come.
I suspect that whatever comes out, both of us will be able to claim we're right, because I suspect we're
that's the
speaking across purposes. Yeah.
In any case, just not to shortchange the rest of the episode. What a beautiful melding of what was to me half of a regular Rick and Morty episode, where I was like, oh, okay, this is a fun time, and going to a wedding and hearing Rick, slag on weddings and make fun of grandfatherly advice with Morty, and then the twist with Tammy. I was like, there's the next level. This is amazing. And it just shot into the stratosphere from there.
Yeah, it was a massively standout episode, and it makes me feel even better about insisting that Rick and Morty is worth sticking with for anyone.
Shall we move to the Shield then?
Yeah. Hey, so this episode I didn't get the chance to tell you this, but after rewatching this episode, you ever have that where you get some really bad news or you find out someone's really pissed off about you and you feel really bad, and then you get distracted by something, and 30 minutes later you're like, God, why do I feel so crappy? What is wrong? And then you remember, oh, that's right, I'm in deep trouble with this guy at work, or this guy, is blah 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 or whatever.
Or my boss said something awful to me.
Exactly. I'm like, oh, that's really a bummer. I remember I had that where I was in the middle of doing stuff. I was like, God, why do I feel so terrible? I'm like, oh, that's right, I'm feeling Shane's agony. I'm feeling bad because that was so real to me, what happened on this episode, and the trapped choking noose around Shane's neck right now.
Yeah, this episode is the end of The Shield. The only problem with that is there's still 5 more episodes. But right, everything that you as a viewer should expect is going to happen. Like, Shane will finally be unmasked. The information is going to come out on Vic. Vic will leave the Force, right? That's the last episode. Vic leaves the Force, right? Isn't that? No, Vic just left the Force. He just turned in his badge and his gun. It's not a ruse. We saw him turn in his gun and fill out the paperwork. Like, what the hell, Shield? And having Shane, like, unmasked in the middle of Farmington and have to make a run for it. And how genius was the softball sign up?
Oh, sure.
As that little bit of like, ooh, are they going to be able to catch him because this woman, or is he going to shoot her because he wants, anything could happen. And so perfectly like familiar to anybody who's been in a workplace situation where somebody's like, oh, hey, I want to talk to you about the thing. Can I, put you down for shortstop? And Shane's just like, yeah, whatever. I'm actually running for my life right now, but I can't admit that to you.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And the moment where you could see Shane's options dwindling and stuff just gets worse and worse, and you see them piecing it together, and you're seeing a potential light at the tunnel. I mean, the window is very small, but you're seeing this wiggle room, this opportunity for Vic Mackey to pull his Vic Mackey thing. Maybe he comes out scot-free, working for ICE, being a reputation as a dirty cop only helps him out, so he can be working for another guy.
It's right there in there's an I, there's a C, there's an E in Mackey.
Wait, say that again.
You can't spell ice without Mackey.
Oh, got it. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's a very narrow gap, and then Vic does something impulsive, and you're like, does this hurt or help his chances more? Because he can't actually continue the investigation, although he can continue to be an informant, but he's not officially on the ICE payroll anymore, or yet, right? So I'm not even sure what that does with him and Olivia. I'm interested to see what happens with that next week. And of course, Corinne is done, right? She was like, all right, I will cover for you because, Shane's wife told me everything, but I'm done with you. Like, she now knows everything. And he had to sort of admit to her without admitting to her that it's all true. And so all of these things have come tumbling down much earlier than I expected, which is great because I can't wait to see what they're going to pull next.
Well, there's this awesome moment in a movie where you move beyond what you saw in the trailers, and or when it moves beyond what you were able to guess would come up next. And all of a sudden you realize you have no idea where it's going to go. And that's so very much the case at this point in The Shield.
Now, 2 sort of mechanical things that I liked about, or 2 things that I thought of with this episode. One is we don't really have a B story this time, and I liked that. The B story was Wagenbach and Billings breaking down 2-man, and that was tied directly into the A story of Vic and Shane. So it all worked together really well. The other thing is when Corinne was told that Vic shot Terry, I started to think back and wonder, would Vic really shoot Terry? It made perfect sense in episode 1. We don't really know Vic. He's a cop on the lam. He can do anything, and he wants to protect himself, and he doesn't want to be uncovered. But the Vic who doesn't want to shoot Shane, the Vic who will stick up for any cop over anybody else, I'm starting to struggle with the idea that he just shoots Terry day 1 because they might get unmasked, because he hasn't even done things that are nearly as bad as the things he's done later.
Well, But again, he's a different guy. We see him evolve over time, and certainly, to be honest, I suspect that it is how bad those things are that he's done over the course since we've seen Vic Mackey that has caused him to be the kind of person who experiences regret, who worries about his legacy and his reputation. You know, we never see all the conversations between him and Shane leading up to the murder of Crowley, right? It's like, it could be they agonized even worse than we saw here, and they decided there's one thing we got to do. We got to do this, otherwise it's all coming down. And we might have believed it in the time in that.
And maybe, yeah. So I could buy that. So that is Vic's. We don't know it at the time, but that's Vic's bottoming out. Right?
Yeah.
That is like, and it doesn't mean he'll never do anything bad again, but that's like the worst thing that he's ever done. Because it is the worst thing he's ever done.
Yes.
He's done some pretty bad things. But, you know, robbing the money train, even shooting who was the informant that he thought had killed Lem.
Oh, yeah. I forget the guy's
That's
name.
kind of the next worst thing that he's done.
Yeah.
And putting a hit out Shane, but then calling it or trying to call it back or wanting to call it back. It shows that he's actually mellowing over time.
Yeah, and I could buy that. I could buy that. I'm not taken out of the show, but you're right. There's how we feel about Vic Mackey, and this is what I was talking about. Like, it's the inverse Breaking Bad, because how we feel about Heisenberg versus Walter White at the very beginning is very, very different. I think that's what we experienced with Vic Mackey, only it's coming out of the muck instead of descending into it.
Well, and it wasn't until Corinne was told he shot Terry Crowley that I'm like, wait a minute. Like, Corinne gets told a lot of things that Vic has done recently, and I believe them all. But now I'm starting to wonder about that one. So, yeah, thanks for walking me through that. It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, and also you notice that she doesn't even flinch. That's not the part she's worried about. She's like, yeah, okay, fine. Why are you on my doorstep, though?
Like, seriously? Now we've got Shane on the run. We have the 1 p.m. calls. Vic isn't on the inside anymore. I mean, obviously he's got plenty of contacts through Gardaki, but he can tell Shane, in all honesty, I don't know. I turned in my badge, you know?
Yeah, that is all I'm going to say, because I don't want to speak about the next episodes.
Okay, that is it for Spoilerin time then, folks. Thank you all for supporting us, patreon.com/Cordkillers. Thank you for enjoying the show. Keep the feedback coming, cordkillers@gmail.com, and we'll spoil you next time.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.